The show focused on delivering beneficial information on everything to do with products and services that can improve your life. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.
Welcome back to the program. This is Key Pacific's Talk About Strata. I'm Sterling Fox, joined by Tony Juventu, the Vancouver Province Condo Smarts columnist, who also has expanded his writing activities. You're in 24 hours now, too, aren't you?
On Thursdays, yes.
On Thursdays. And, of course, Tony is the executive director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia. Thanks for your emails. We are delighted to say we're receiving a few, and we'll welcome many more. The address is radio@keypacific.com, and Key Pacific is kind of sneaky. Key is Q-U-A-Y, like New Westminster Key or Lonsdale Key. So let's do that again. It's radio@Q-U-A-Y Pacific, keypacific.com. And we have an email from Mrs. McMillan in Oliver, and this by way of opening the door to this discussion, Tony, about changes to the regs.
Yes.
And she writes, our strata of 18 bare land units in a retirement community located in the Oliver area have been reviewing the depreciation legislation. And we just don't see the point for small strata corporations. Owners are responsible for each of their units. And other than snow removal and insurance, we have very few common expenses. We've decided to take advantage of the exemptions in the regulations, but really don't understand the problem. Mrs. McMillan in Oliver asks for your assistance, Mr. Juventu. So where do we start with this one?
Well, I think one of the interesting things about this email is it actually comes from a listener in an area where we don't broadcast, but people are actually downloading the podcasts off the website and listening to them.
Isn't that terrific?
So that's how we made the connection with this lady. And this is the column that will be appearing in Sunday's Province this Sunday as well.
Okay.
On December 13th, we had a series of regulation changes that occurred in the province, and they've been coming for a long time. This all started back in 2009 when Bill 8 came in that adopted mandatory depreciation planning. And in British Columbia, it's called depreciation planning. In other jurisdictions, it's called reserve fund studies.
Okay.
But what it is it's a planning tool that's legislated that requires strata corporations to look at the basic long-term renewals and maintenance requirements of their buildings. So there's a step-by-step set of procedures in the regulations, and they kind of follow it as they go. You basically have to create an asset inventory. So all of the things that you own, what does the strata own as common property, common assets, or those things that they have to maintain and repair over the long term?
So the new regulations now require every strata group in the province to have this material on file close by. You would think it would be kind of an automatic, a given, but clearly it's not the case.
Well, and as you'll see once we answer Mrs. McMillan's question, it's become apparent to them that they've had some misunderstandings, significant misunderstandings about their strata. But part of the depreciation plan is that you're going to hire someone, or someone is going to be commissioned to do this report for you.
Okay.
Okay, so part of the proceedings of the report is basically going to be an asset inventory. So they're going to come onto your property, they're going to look at your property, they're going to look at your records, and they're going to figure out what does the strata have to maintain and repair in the future. So, and that's going to include two things. It's going to include those things that have to be renewed when they die and have to be replaced. So the roof has to be replaced, come to the end of its life. The siding, the decks, the balconies, maybe the plumbing systems in the building, maybe the sprinkler systems in the building. If you have pools and landscape gardens that belong to the strata, underground parking garage, and your heating and ventilation system. So all the building components the strata owns that they have a responsibility to maintain and repair in the future has to be part of this report. So those are the replacement things, and the maintenance things are also included. The maintenance things are things that don't occur every year. So it's going to be things like, when do you restain the siding on the outside of the building, or redo the caulking on the outside of the building, or the fences and the panels and those types of issues. So that's an inventory of what you have. The second part of this is whoever does this job, your asset planner, your depreciation planner, and it's going to be professions like professional engineers, certified professionals, and geoscientists, and architects, and certified appraisers.
So these are people that strata councils are going to have to hire to come in and do this job.
You'll be hiring out consultants to do this work for you.
Okay.
And so the Act sets out some pretty stringent conditions on what has to be required in the report and what materials have to be required in the report. So it's going to say, so it says that you have to do an inventory of the systems, and then you have to do an evaluation. Well, an evaluation means we're looking at the roof, what condition of the roof, what is it, how much life is left in it, how long is it going to last,
and presumably how much is it going to cost to replace it, fix it, whatever, in the short and medium term.
And that's the next part. It's not just what is it, what condition is it, and how much longer is it going to last, but it's going to be how much is it going to cost when the life comes out. So if we're at year 15 and the roof, after the inspections and the evaluations, has 22 years of life in it, we'll know in 7 years this roof has to be replaced. And at a financial formula that we reach, we're going to figure out that the roof on our building is going to be 180 grand.
Right.
Well, if the strata only has $20,000 in the reserves, odds are they're facing a pretty significant levy just to replace that roof. We haven't dealt with all of the other building systems. So this is a way of really, this is for strata corporations for their long-term planning.
Right.
But this is also going to be an overwhelming tool for buyers. Buyers are going to come in.
They'll be able to look at these reports then, right?
As of March 1st this year, it will be a mandatory requirement that if you have a report, it must be disclosed.
So we were just talking about people whose lives are changing and who are actively considering strata and condominium residences.
Yes.
And so now when they're shopping for the dream home in the sky with granite and stainless steel, they'll be able to, as of March 1, include in their shopping, may I see your report, please? I need to see your numbers.
Well, it's not may, it's must. If the report has been done. Now, this has just come in for December 13th last year.
Okay.
So we've got a 2-year compliance window for this.
Okay.
So it's going to take about 2 years for most strata corporations to ramp up with their reports. But there are many who've already done reports. That's why the regulation for disclosure around the report has changed for March 1st. So if you're coming along, we're looking at a high-rise building that's 11 years old, right?
Yeah.
They've already had a depreciation report done. They now, when they do a Form B for you, which is an information certificate, I'm a buyer, I request an information certificate that tells me a lot of information about the strata. One of those documents I have to disclose as the strata corporation is this depreciation report. So it's a huge change because now not only am I looking at the building and all the assets of the building and all the things I like about the building, I'm now going to be looking at this depreciation report and saying, hey, wait a minute, in the next 5 years, I have some pretty big levies coming up I'm going to have to pay for. I'm going to adjust my offer. Or we're negotiating, when we're negotiating this, we're going to fix our prices on this because someone's going to have to pay for these, right? This roof is due in 2 years, and it looks like the assessment for each unit is going to be about $10,000. I'm going to negotiate this amount of money.
As a buyer, the negotiation would include, look, you're asking the selling price that you want me to pay assumes there's a top-notch brand new roof in place, and you're not acknowledging the fact that it's darn near need of replacement. So I'm going to adjust my offer downwards because I'm going to have to be a portion of paying for that replacement in 2 or 3 or 10 years from now.
Well, and especially this is where it's going to come full cycle for strata corporations, especially if your contingency reserve funds are low. Now, if you're anticipating your roof is due in 5 years and it's going to cost $300,000, and the reserve funds have $500,000, then it isn't a risk, right? And that contingency reserve fund value was all of a sudden going to provide a lot for you. But the question that was asked was, what are the procedures on exempting ourselves from this requirement,
because according to Mrs. McMillan and her group in Oliver, they're going to take advantage of the exemptions in the regulations, the new ones, but really they don't understand the procedure in the first place.
There are 2 exemptions. Stratas that are 4 units or less are exempt. So if you're in a 4-plex, triplex, duplex, you're automatically exempt. And any strata in 5 units or more can also be exempt if they pass a 3/4 vote once a year. So every year that they want to be exempt from this requirement, they have to pass a 3/4 vote. But before you do this, I would caution anyone to think seriously about what the repercussions are.
Well, I was just going to say, what's the advantage to ignoring financial realities that could come crashing down around your ears in the days ahead. Don't you want to be able to anticipate those things?
Essentially, this is just planning for the retirement and renewal of our buildings.
Yeah.
That's all this is doing. So, everyone, we talk well about putting together financial retirement plans for ourselves, but at some point, our buildings go through the same cycle. We're now, if we look at the first stratas, look at the very first strata that was built in Port Moody, we're now getting to the 50-year window for when we started building all the stratas in these communities.
The first strata in British Columbia in Port Moody?
Port Moody, yeah.
Isn't that was it an apartment building?
It was an Arthur Erickson building.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah,
oh.
yeah. So it's so that's the first strata in the province. Officially, that was filed and created was in the 60s. So we're now getting to that 50-year window where we have buildings that are in a good majority of the market, 35 years plus, and we have a number of those buildings who've done no upgrades or repairs other than the roof's leaking, let's replace it. But forgetting about all of the other systems, the drainage systems and the plumbing systems and the decks and the balconies and the siding, doors and windows. These things don't last forever. And so, it's when are they going to need to be replaced and how much is it going to cost? So this is going to be a difficult piece of legislation for a lot of the older strata corporations who haven't planned for this. Now, if you're an older strata corporation, I'm thinking of one in Port Moody and Burnaby that have recently finished all their upgrades. They've redone their plumbing and they've upgraded their elevators and their decks, balconies, replaced the windows, redone the roofing over the last 5 years. Their buildings have basically been totally renewed.
And these are older buildings.
And they're older buildings,
right.
But they're a great investment because they are well maintained, well upgraded, and even with all those renewals, these communities have very healthy contingency funds for emergencies and long problems.
And not to disparage today's construction methods by any stretch of the imagination, but some of these older buildings were really well built.
Some of them were, and some of them were not.
Yeah.
As they find out when they start doing major renewals.
And how, again, as the prospective strata condo buyer that's, again, contemplating this major life change, how could you find out whether the building that you suddenly got very excited about was in fact well or poorly built?
Well, I don't know if the quality of construction will be part of the depreciation reports, but certainly the life expectancy of a lot of the building components will give you a pretty good idea about that, right?
Okay.
If the decks and the balconies and the doors, the windows and the outside cladding and the roofs and the elevator and all of these types of components are 30 years old and they're pretty much at the end of their life, it gives you an idea of what you're facing. And really, it's not just the buyer. Go beyond the buyer. We have a buyer who's coming in with a high mortgage ratio. It's the mortgage provider and the mortgage insurer who are going to be asking questions as to whether this person can afford this.
Mrs. McMillan in Oliver, and to your friends in your 18 group strata bare land title, thank you so much for the email. The address, by the way, if you'd like to fire a question off to us, is radio@QuayPacific, QUAY Pacific.com. I'm Sterling Fox. Tony Giventu is the province condo columnist and executive director of the Condominium Homeowners Association of British Columbia. Lots more ahead. Stay with us.
There's still more ahead with Experts on Call, the show focused on delivering relevant and beneficial consumer information. This is Experts on Call on AM 650.